Come up in here. Good morning, morning, morning. How y'all doing? Hey, it's Mr. Fox, the Afternoons Podcast. It is the morning show. Special Friday. Memorial Day weekend is here. Of course, if you've been locked into the Refuse Podcast, YouTube channel, podcast, wherever you get your podcast, as you can see, we are clocking pretty heavily over here on the YouTube channel. This is the I Refuse Podcast YouTube channel. If this is your first time joining us, we are continuing our Surviving Diddy series. As the Diddy trial unloads, the racketeering and human trafficking trial, I want to make that clear in case y'all are confused. In case you are confused as to why this person's being called, why that person's being called, when you have a lot of witnesses and when you are working with a state as big as New York State, and particularly New York City, and a person as high profile as this man is, they're going to call everybody, a part of the enterprise, employee, other artists, former girlfriends, any person that's part of the 7 degrees of separation. We're going to get into day 9, which was yesterday. We went and talked about day 8 yesterday morning, the last morning show or the afternoon show. We're going to talk about yesterday where they continued to cross-examine former assistant George Kaplan. And of course, the main event was when Kid Cudi came to testify. So look at the page, subscribe, hit that subscribe button, of course, and get into the podcast wherever you get your podcast. So without further ado, right? So yesterday, the trial continued. They continued to cross-examine his former assistant, George Kaplan, from the day previously. Now, Kaplan, I believe, was an assistant after the previous assistant that they had on the stand earlier this week. We talked about that 2 videos ago. George Kaplan yesterday returns to the stand. Yesterday, like I said, was the 9th day of the trial. Now, at this point, when they call the assistants and they've called Don McCard, and I believe they called Kalina Harper, I believe, and Aubrey O'Day. They're trying to get witnesses to any kind of physical violence that's occurred. And I believe they tried to do this with Kid Cudi, who came on later. It is, for those of you that are not getting, a domestic violence situation and trying to undermine a victim of domestic violence, and you don't understand the psychology behind it. Let this past week of the Diddy trial educate you and inform you as to the nuances. There are still people out here, even though we're about 2 or 3 weeks into the trial at this point, still trying to poke holes into Cassie Ventura's experience, into her relationship. They still can't wrap their head around why she filed that $20 or $30 million thing almost 2 years ago, even though we went into great detail as to why. Abuse Survivors Act, New York City, they have a year to file. And she was one of the first and a high-profile victim of abuse. Of course, the defense's job is to try to put doubt into the juror's mind when it comes to Cassie Ventura, when it comes to anybody that comes across that stand. Of course, Cassie Ventura is, I would say, the icon in this entire experience because she was essentially the one that blew the lid off of this thing. You know, since filing that suit a couple years ago, we've seen some large, high level like executions of federal involvement. Um, let's see, we've seen some major raids that's disrupted the Hollywood Hills. I'm pretty sure a lot of other creeps up there went running towards the sunset, like, ooh, time to go, time to go. And over the course of the last 2 weeks of this trial, yes, they are going to examine and discuss and pull out the rug over what was alleged, what you think is true, and what you think may have happened. That's the point of this trial, is to go through all of that. So, for those of you that just are not getting it, you know, the psychologists, when you have, that's why education is very important. That's why being informed is very important. This is not new. Like, women that are being physically abused, that are being assaulted for so long, there is they get it they at some point they disassociate. You know, there are clips of Cassie out there during the course of her relationship with this man. You know, she's doing interviews that are in stark contrast to when that first single came out, Me and You. Um, Even from Me and You to Unofficial Girl, just not the same. It's almost like somebody took the youth and the innocence out of her. And, you know, unfortunately, there are a lot of people out here that are like looking for some kind of gotcha against this girl because, oh, you know, it's looking like she's more of like an accomplice to this. As if personally in your own life and some of the lives of your friends and stuff, you wouldn't be so quick to say that same or keep that same energy with them when they are not the same person from one visit to the next, when they're with a dude that you know is just not shit. Like, if it was somebody closer to you, you would totally be acting different. The nuance, and I've gone over this, but I'll reinstate it here, like, women that are being abused feel trapped. At this point, we've all been informed that when she tried to leave, tried to date other people, tried to move on, there were consequences. And even going so far as to, it's such it's such a convenient coincidence, right? That the moment she moves on, people's houses get broken into, people's cars get blown up, or you know, Molotov cocktails being thrown. And this is after years of abuse. You know, her mom has gotten on the stand. His other assistants have gotten on the stand, and the big question is, have you witnessed any abuse? And to to the majority of those that have took the stand have said, yeah. And if you haven't, you have bruising, you have a swollen lip, you have marks around your eyes, you're wearing shades, all the telltale signs that a woman's being abused. What more do you guys need? When George Kaplan went up on the stand, one of the first things he said around 9:30 yesterday morning was that he did witness a physical altercation between Ventura and Combs in 2015 during a private plane ride to Las Vegas. Kaplan was seated at the table on the plane, that he heard glass shattering behind him. He then saw Combs standing over Ventura with a whiskey glass while she was on her back with her legs out trying to create space. Ventura screamed, "Is anybody seeing this?" before hearing more glass crashing, is what Kaplan testified yesterday. She was only 23 years old at the time, and security did not intervene. He then went on to say that Combs came up to sit in the plane's cabin, but told Ventura to stay in the back where the bedroom was located behind a partition. He goes on to say that he had to rush out of Combs' house to buy health and beauty items to cover up nasty bruises on Ventura's face. He recalled the incident in 2015 in Los Angeles, where he saw a visibly upset Cassie with bruising under her right eyebrow. This prompted Combs to order him to get over-the-counter lotions and other remedies to mask the discoloration. He specifically remembered buying witch hazel. That thing still works. Kaplan left his employ as Combs' assistant in 2015 because it did not sit right with him, the physical violence. While Kaplan himself was not on the receiving end of the physical violence, people are just not comfortable with being around domestic violence. And you're probably asking yourself, well, why didn't any of these people go to the police? When it comes to like the legal system, third party hearsay is just not strong enough to get a person on assault or domestic violence. And unfortunately, you've seen over the history of time failures or gaps or holes in the stronghold to keep an abuser from his victim. You've seen many, many times where the victim can file a restraining order, a protective custody thing, and that doesn't stop an abuser from maintaining his distance, A, but also not taking it up a notch. You've seen time and time again where female victims end up missing or end up dead at the hands of their abuser. It sucks, and I'm sure those that have witnessed the physical violence that she has had to endure has carried a level of guilt or shame by not intervening. But at the end of the day, you got to respect that, some people got out. And I'm pretty sure at that point, Cassie was not only spiraling down into a deep, dark place, but was also, I would say, using drugs to self-medicate. By the time Kaplan left in this December of 2015, he witnessed like abuse over the course of several months. Challenging decision, but it was the right thing to do. At various times, attending the wounds at different times on Cassie. There was one incident involving decorative apples that Kaplan witnessed Combs throwing at a different woman named Gina as she tried to shield herself, and it happened in Miami, probably at his house. Late one night, screaming back and forth, Kaplan said he gave Combs a medicine bag. Combs had a Louis Vuitton bag full of illicit drugs. That was a separate bag. He put his resignation in September of 2015, claiming that he had to resign because his father was sick with cancer. At some point, I guess to get through the stress and the trauma of it all. He had to decompartmentalize that whole thing. um, of course, even through all of that, um, Kaplan, while he didn't like how Diddy handled himself and carried himself personally, he still looks back at the opportunity to be his personal assistant as a once in a lifetime opportunity. That from time to time, Combs was able to motivate and inspire folks like him to push further and go higher. It was almost like a Harvard University experience. Of course, Combs' defense is trying to undermine the racketeering charge, and such is the case when they try to cross-examine. It is so interesting because yesterday or 2 days ago was Biggie's birthday. Which also happens to be the date of Combs' company holiday. He was asked by Diddy's lawyers, would he been working the day before if he was still employed by Combs? Kaplan said no, because Combs usually gave everybody the day off from work to mark, that as the year that, or the day that Biggie was born in 1972. And here's a conspiracy theory that I have. I think that he has something to do with Biggie being murdered back in 1997, March 9th. Kaplan doesn't recall telling anybody about the apple throwing incident. He said, well, while his job was threatened by Combs, he was never subject to threats of physical violence from his former employer. But right before lunch, here's the big thing. Right before lunch yesterday, dun dun dun, Kikati takes the stand. But before he does, he is seen walking up to the courtroom smoking a cigarette. If stress beyond belief was a person, here's the other thing I want you guys to understand. If you are like a little slow on the uptake, when you are as connected and as powerful as Diddy is or was, he probably still is from behind bars. Add to that the stuff he's put Cassie through by the time she and Kid Cudi were, low key a thing for a little bit. That would have been cute had that been public. Like I always feel like, when you think of women that are celebrities or in the music industry that have had a pretty troubling dating history, and you come across a relationship that wasn't public, I'm like, dang, that would have been cute. Like I still wonder, had Janet Jackson's life been different, had she stayed with Q-Tip, and that was a public relationship? I still think about that. Um, and to know that Cassie and Kid Cudi were low key a thing for a little bit, I just wonder, like, man, that could have been that would have been really really cute. But nevertheless, Kid Cudi, aka Scott Mescudi, is that a Mexican last name? Anyway, he took the witness stand yesterday. There was a brief relationship in December 2011 that unfortunately prompted, they say, a threat of violence and blackmail from Combs. That, she testified the week prior. The expectation was that Kid Cudi confirms much of what Cassie said, which I believe he did. Testimony that included violent threats against him. I said earlier, it's just too much of a coincidence since y'all claim, oh, this is really just a trial about putting my man's freaky bits on public display. And it's like, no, there are other things y'all are not catching that could very well satisfy the racketeering charges. Like, none of the charges are because you're freaky. So the court case is not about being freaky. Like, you mean to tell, like, y'all really think, use your common sense. Like, use those brain cells. She tried to move on with her life, not once, but several times. And the moment she starts to get a little something going, shit starts happening around Kid Cudi. Kid Cudi's house was broken into. His vehicle was blown up, like hole through the roof. There's like, was that soot and smoke residue on the car? The shit is crazy, and all of this is part of evidence, by the way. Like, y'all, what y'all not getting about that part? There was an expectation while Kitty was on the stand yesterday that he would speak to his dog being traumatized. After being put behind a closed door in December 2011, prosecutor argued that that's relevant to the break-in. The judge is saying he's not going to testify to what the dog thought. Like he's not Professor X. He can't get into the mind of his dog. Like you don't know that. They said Kid Cudi can testify about the dog, but only in broad terms, noting that the dog is no longer with us. Oh. Kid Cudi first met Cassie back in 2008, but he didn't start dating until 2011. At that point, Ventura was having problems with Combs at the time, and the couple were not dating when Ventura and Kid Cudi got together. See, she was able to get out. And as much as you want to believe, oh well, she wasn't in danger if she was able to, like, shut up. Shut your ass. Shut your ass. In December 2011, Cudi testified that he got a call from Ventura saying that Combs had found out about them and that she asked him to pick her up. She was nervous and told him that Combs was abusive. Once Cassie was with him, he took her to the Sunset Marquise to keep her safe. He said he received a call letting him know that Combs and an associate were at Kid Cudi's home. Kid Cudi said the call was made by Combs' employee at the time, Capricorn Clark. That's another person. And Ventura was with her on speakerphone. He recalls how angry Combs was when he allegedly broke into his home in the Hollywood Hills. He was remarkably calm when he called to confront him. He said, "What's up?" And I said, "Motherfucker, are you in the house?" He said, "I'm here waiting for you," Kid Cudi testified. He told the court that he wanted to fight Combs, but reminded himself he didn't know who Combs might have with him. Shout out to the Associated Press, NBC News for the deeds. Kid Cudi goes on to testify that his car caught fire in his driveway one day in 2012 while Kid Cudi was about 45 minutes away from home. Testified that his dog sitter called to tell him what was happening and he rushed home. Friends sent him photos that showed the top of his porch open where a Molotov cocktail was thrown in. Prosecutors showed photos of the car in court and had Kid Cudi describe them. The previous week, Cassie had testified that Combs threatened her and Kid Cudi, stating that Combs went to set fire to Kid Cudi's car in the driveway. Ooh, that's a tongue twister. She went on to testify that Combs assured her it would not be by his hands and he would not be in the country when it happened. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Now, a couple of videos ago, it was exposed in the court, his method of not keeping a paper trail when it came to using money. Like he would pay for stuff in cash. And he didn't want it tied to Bad Boy. Remember, there's also a racketeering charge or two in this case. You got the illegal guns now registered. You got security and bodyguards that you're possibly paying. For him to say it would not be by his hands and he would not be in the country when it happened, there's a lot to explore there. There's enough reasonable doubt that there's not racketeering involved. Like you didn't pay people to throw the Molotov cocktail while you're in another country. Nobody's going to work for free. Remember that. I just y'all not waking up. Y'all are not catching up. Y'all not getting this. Y'all are not getting this. Of course, Kid Cudi doesn't look uncomfortable or stressed. Some of had probably a whole pack of cigarettes where he pulled up to the doors of the courthouse. There was a little bitty tense moment, they say yesterday, when the defense objected to Kid Cudi connecting Combs to the fire. Cudi was asked, why did he request to meet with Combs after his car was set on fire? To which Cudi responded, he reached out because he knew Combs was involved with the fire. To which his Combs' defense team objected to the speculation, and the answer was struck from the record. Let me tell you, it unfortunately you can't speculate. Like I said, third party, he say, she say, what a person thought, only things that you can speculate, anything you can only speculate to is not going to be part of the record, is not admissible. They won't even entertain that shit. But those of us that are outside knows exactly what is happening. But unfortunately, you can't do anything with it. But Cudi ain't no punk. He said, look, I know the motherfucker was behind my shit getting blown up. Because how is it all the other days that I've had that fine automobile in my driveway, nothing's been happening to it. But the moment I start seeing this lady that you were saying, shit starts happening. Of course, cross-examination of Kid Cudi on the stand continues. To which Cudi likened Combs to a Marvel supervillain. Just like a comic book bad guy after his car had been torched. And of course he blames Diddy, I would too. The pair did agree to see each other at a Los Angeles hotel meeting room, and Combs was already there by the time Kid Cudi arrived. Combs was calmly looking out the window with hands behind his back, looking like a Marvel supervillain. I would imagine he was probably dressed in all white, like in the Been Around the World music video, but his hands were behind his back, looking out the window like he was Kingpin or somebody from the Spider-Man multiverse. Like, what? Are you serious? So unreal, so unserious. But you gotta think about it though. Like all this calmness after after my car was blown up, it's a little weird. And he said, Cuddy said on the stand, the calmness during the meeting was off-putting. At, at the conclusion of the meeting, they shook hands, and he asked what he was going to do about the car. Combs denied it, claimed that he didn't know what he was talking about. Combs then asked if they were cool, to which Cuddy responded that Combs burned his car. Like, come on. A few years after that, Cuddy did testify that Combs gave him a general apology for the past. What are you apologizing for if you didn't do anything wrong? It was the last thing he expected to hear from him. Of course, it was ruled out of bounds for any intimate details about Kid Cudi and Cassie Ventori's relationship, as it should be. At some point, Kid Cudi agreed to meet with Combs to discuss them both being played by Cassie. Cudi responded that it was true. Steele asked if the person who played both men were Cassie, asked Kid Cudi if Cassie was living two different lives, to which the rapper responded that she was. I don't know where they're trying to go with that. She was still shaken up and worried over Combs, that he would go to Kid Cudi's house after the discovery of her relationship with Kid Cudi. Prosecutor Emily Johnson took over the questioning after the defense, asking what Cassie told him about Combs' abuse. Kid Cudi told the court that Cassie informed him that Combs would hit and sometimes kick her. Here we go. He went on to say that he had to break away from Cassie as drama was out of hand. He and Cassie needed to stop seeing each other due to the black blowback of events that seemed to unfold. The drama was just too out of hand. Like Kid Cudi just strikes me as a chill dude, low key, don't want any issues. He gave her some space, and you're probably asking yourself at this point, why did anybody intervene? Like he did, like he tried to keep her safe, but strange shit just kept happening. And given at that time what he knew about the abuse that she endured, 2 plus 2 is 4. Like those of us outside of the courthouse that have brain cells and common sense, it's the parallels are just too convenient. Like I said, like it's right there. Unfortunately, you can't, like I said, speculate on something. That's not evidence. But I believe there is enough there when Cudi said that Combs apologized for the past. After the car is blown up, after the threats and the blackmail. I'm curious to know if they will pull Diddy on the stand. Like at this point, it'll probably be within the last 2 weeks. Like you just that'll be the thing, but I don't know. It's still kind of early for that. His testimony concluded around 12 something yesterday. There was a makeup artist yesterday, Milo Morales, that took the stand. Of course, people that are being called to testify since last week were people that were mentioned by Cassie while she was on the stand, or that were mentioned in the filing that she did. So at some point last week, when Cassie was on the stand, she told the court that Morales stayed behind to nap as she and friends went to a last minute party at Prince's house. To which Ventura rushed out of that party once she saw Combs. whom she didn't speak to before going to the party. Cassie did say last week while she was on the stand that Combs tracked her down and beat her in another room while Morales was in the vicinity. She said to the court that she stayed with Morales for a few days as her injuries healed. The defense was accused of prompting sexual stereotypes by handing over topless pictures of Cassie Ventura. Combs' team gave the government pictures that showed when the next witness, the makeup artist, did work for the defendant. Some of these photos were of a topless Ventura, which Comey did not like. But while Morales was on the stand yesterday, she corroborated some prior testimony from Ventura that Combs beat her in a hotel bedroom after spotting her at an unexpected party at Princess Los Angeles home, just for going to a party. She then proceeds to tell the court that she stayed behind to take a nap on the couch of Ventura's Beverly Hills hotel room that night, woke up in a commotion. She testified that Ventura came in and went straight to the bedroom with Combs behind her. The door was shut to the bedroom, and she heard yelling and screaming before Combs left the hotel room. While she didn't witness what occurred between the couple, she did see that Cassie had a swollen eye, a busted lip, and knots on her head after the incident. At that point, Ventura stayed with Morales for a few days. Doctor came to check on her, refused to go to the emergency room. She left the incident. The incident left Morales in a fear for her life, so she didn't call the police. At some point, she and Cassie saw each other a few times after that night, but never acknowledged the incident. The makeup artist, Morales, while on the stand, testifies that she gave a flurry of interviews in recent months as misconduct allegations against Combs surfaced. She acknowledged speaking on the record to well-known media figures such as Don Lemon and Piers Morgan in 2024 after participating in some of the Combs documentaries. The defense tried to paint Morales like an attention seeker, which fell flat. The hotel manager at the Elm Hermitage Hotel, Frederic Zamora, testified on the stand that the room would have required a deep cleaning after Combs stayed there. Combs would stay under an alias. Noted marks in the hotel profile included that he used excessive amounts of oil and spilled candle wax on everything. The room had to be marked out of order for a deep cleaning after Combs left. Additional $500 fee for cleaning and damage. No cross-examination of the hotel manager was conducted. And that was that. Witnesses next week will be another former assistant of Combs, members of the LAPD and LA Fire Department. Of course, court will resume on Tuesday since Monday's a holiday. There was no testimony today or court time today. And that was that. So, look, I gave y'all a lot. It's going to be another week. Court resumes next Tuesday. Of course, I will be doing my morning shows and afternoon shows to keep y'all entertained. Hope y'all have been enjoying this so far as much as I've enjoyed doing it. Thank you for joining me today. I Refuse Podcast morning show. I will catch you guys later. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Get real beef burgers. Get into turkey burgers. Cancer is real. Have a good day. I'm going to take my black ass to the gym and stay fit for the revolution. And I will catch you guys later. Get into the podcast. In case y'all forgot. In case y'all forgot. Here is the podcast channel. Subscribe, follow, subscribe, and we will catch you guys later. Get into the I Refuse Podcast where you get your podcast. Usual Suspects podcast with me and Abstract. The logo looks like this. That's the logo right there. Wherever you get your podcast, that's me and my best friend. And continue to support original Black content creators. Don't have to wear a wig to talk, to entertain, and keep y'all informed about what's going on. And we love what we do. We'll catch you guys later. Have a good weekend.